and welcome to this week's edition of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline Roche, Sweyn Hunter, and occasional guests guide you to the world of online communications in a show established by the late, great internet evangelist John Popham. And in traditional fashion, we ask our guests and my co-presenter how the weather is where they are. So, Sweyn, how's the weather where you are?
I'm in Kirkwall in Orkney, and the day is improving steadily. It was overcast, but I can see blue skies coming over the bay, so that's good news.
Excellent. And our special guest this week is Nicky Getgood. Nicky, how are you? Where are you? And how's the weather where you are?
I'm in Cardiff, and it's glorious. The birds are tweeting, the sun is shining. Yeah, it's really lovely today.
That's good to hear. And here in the west of Ireland, it is a kind of a cloudy sky, but I've already been out for a walk this morning, which was lovely. And we're not expecting rain, which is a good thing to report on. So if we go through the things we're celebrating around this time of the month, yesterday was the end of Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is one we missed last week. According to the Department of Education, 15% of students in the United Kingdom have a learning difference. So Sienna Castellon, a student with several learning differences, launched Neurodiversity Celebration Week to encourage schools and colleges to change the way they perceive their autistic students and students with learning differences. She believes it's important to flip the narrative so that neurodivergent students are empowered to perceive themselves more positively. She also believes it's important to change negative misconceptions and stereotypes about individuals who think differently and perceive the world differently. And in 2020, over 500,000 students from over 760 schools took part in Neurodiversity Celebration Week from around the world. So we hope that other celebrations will be happening online where people are this week, and we look forward to hearing more about that. We carry on to this week, and from Monday 22nd of March to Sunday 28th of March is Debt Awareness Week. And this is organised by stepchange.org. And since 2014, they've been running an annual campaign to help people talk more openly about debt-related issues. And over the years, it's helped millions of people to get free debt advice. And they would love support for this year's campaign for 2021. So it takes place this week, and they'll be running activities across social media forums and websites, as well as working with bloggers, celebrities, and anyone who's listening to this show. So if you've got anything to say about Debt Awareness Week, do visit that website. And tomorrow, Tuesday, the 23rd of March, is National Day of Reflection. And this is a day being organised by Marie Curie, the charity. And since the first lockdown began in 2020, hundreds of thousands of people have died, and too many lives have been cut short, and millions have been bereaved. And behind the statistics, and whatever the cause, every death has been devastating for the people left behind. So they're asking people to join them on the 23rd of March, the first anniversary of the first UK lockdown, for a National Day of Reflection to reflect on our collective loss, support those who've been bereaved, and hope for a brighter future. There are still tough times ahead as the death toll continues to rise, they say. This annual day will give us all time to pause and think about this unprecedented loss we're facing and support each other through grief in the years to come. So hopefully that will give comfort to some people and help us to think about what we want to do in the future. So we get on now to our special guest, Nicky Getgood, who's a hyperlocal veteran. Her digital journey began with a love for the communities she lives in, which led her to establishing the Dig With Is Good hyperlocal profile, later creating Roath Tots for fellow local parents during her children's formative years. And she's currently organising clinician residence group via Facebook and face-to-face and online meetings to discuss issues and developments in the area she lives in, which is in Cardiff. Her previous work experience includes helping people across the UK create community websites and online profiles with Talk About Local, supporting the design and development of e-learning solutions and material for Cardiff University, and providing Building Community Trust Invest Local programme with communications and administrative support. Nicky is currently studying online towards a master's degree in art history with the Open University after graduating with a BA Honours in 2019. Nicky recently volunteered with JHASW's Cardiff Reform Synagogue Holocaust Memorial Tablet Project, conducting largely online historical research to write the biographies of 6 victims named on the tablet. However, supporting her father during the last 8 years has also taught Nicky about some of the limitations as well as the capabilities of digital solutions. Nicky's father sadly died during the first wave of COVID-19 a year ago, hence why she's vocally supporting the current campaign for a COVID inquiry now. Nicky, you're very welcome to the show. We're delighted to have you here. And it's great to see you after 10 years. I knew you when you lived in Birmingham.
It seems like just yesterday we were sitting across each other in Digbeth Residents Association meetings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, opposite ends of, we're in completely different countries. So
but still connected by the magic of digital, which we're very glad to have. So Nicky, we usually ask our guests how they got started in kind of the work that they do. So can you give us a flavour of your early career and kind of the things that stand out from then? When did you get started on the internet and on digital, do you think?
Well, it wasn't a career to begin with. It was just a hobby. Basically, in Birmingham, there was quite a lot happening. You know, a kind of core of people discovered blogging and kind of its potential. So Pete Ashton was doing Created in Birmingham, which was growing into quite, you know, a strong voice at the time. And I'd moved into one of these new city centre apartments in Digbeth. I'd moved from Mosey to Digbeth, which was it was kind of a strange area. It's the old Irish Quarter, so you've got all the, you know, the Irish Centre and all these sort of quite old traditional pubs that you know, seem to keep going because it's so near to Birmingham's football stadium. And then you've got these sort of apartments just springing up left, right and centre, and sort of these old industrial units that were being taken over by arts organisations. So just these studios and galleries and kind of these weird wonderful happenings were taking place. So, you know, the old Bird's Eye Custard Factory was a kind of space for artists to rent studio and office spaces and that kind of thing. And I was friendly with Pete at the time, and he said, oh, you know, shouldn't there be a blog covering just Digbeth, because so much stuff is just happening in kind of a, you know, a quite a small space. And he created Digbeth is Good and kind of gave me the keys to it. And you know, I was sort of, I suppose, young, free and single. So, you know, I could spend my life just sort of wandering around. Actually, we called it ligging. That was a great hobby then. It was basically the art galleries and stuff. They'd have launch events with free wine. So we'd all go along. And this was a great way to just, you know, do something apart from look at art I didn't quite understand but found intriguing, and neck free wine, you know, was to actually do something a bit more productive maybe. So yeah, it was an interesting time, it really was, and just there was so many changes going on. So and there was this kind of this kind of, you know, there was the kind of old Digbeth with the kind of the older pubs and kind of the Irish history group. Yeah, it was interesting, the stuff they used to put on, and the kind of new Digbeth, with the West Street art springing up, and kind of these very sort of multimedia exhibitions at Vivid and like the Icon East Side as it was then, and that kind of thing. So it was just a lot of very different things that were interesting that were happening. And you know, it was just, I didn't really think anyone was reading, to be honest. I just liked writing, and it was quite a fun thing to do, was to try and just record all this and blog all of this. But it sort of, after a while, it built up quite a following.
It did.
Yeah, and so that was my journey actually. And then I got contacted by Will Perrin, who was doing King's Cross blog, and he said, "Oh, you're part of the hyperlocal movement." And I was like, "The what?" And he told me about, you know, this project he had in mind, Talk About Local, to kind of train people through UK online centres to do something similar. And when it started, I got a job doing that, which was really interesting. It was, a lot of trains up and down the country going to UK online centres and just training people in how to create a blog or, a Facebook page or a Twitter profile, that sort of thing.
So kind of social media surgeries, but doing particular blogging, concentrating on blogging?
Yeah, well, not necessarily blogging. It was kind of whatever fitted the molds for where we were. So, a lot of people, it would be a Facebook group, or because that's where people were already online. It was compared to social media surgeries a lot. And I did hear Will say that whereas kind of Nick Booth's social media surgeries was a kind of pull model, so it would be for people who already had an interest in that and wanted to learn that. This was more of a push model where we were actually going out to UK online centres where they may have come in for something completely different, but we'd sort of help them in those spaces and kind of push the ideas out there and just see what transpired.
You must have met some interesting characters along your journey then.
I did. It was amazing. It really was. It was just the differences in the places that we went to. So some would be really rural, like Kington in Herefordshire. That was, they created the Kington Blackboard, and it replaced a literal physical blackboard that sat in the city centre, well, not in the city centre, in the village centre. And then it would be kind of more inner city areas like, W14 London, that kind of thing. It's
surprising to me that somebody in an inner city would need a similar support, I suppose, to someone living in a rural area. Was there many differences between them?
I suppose in more inner city areas, I'm not surprised at all, actually. I think, it's hard to connect with people even if you're in a very densely populated area. Sometimes harder, I suppose, because there's a lot more strangers about. But no, I suppose it was more communities of interest. So Digbeth is Good was very much about kind of the arts and the kind of quirks of the area, and it might be more kind of niche interests, or like the residents association websites, that kind of thing, whereas the more rural areas, it would tend to be more about the whole area and kind of more all encompassing.
And are any of those blogs, as far as you know, are they still going, or have you kept in touch with anybody?
I've got to be honest, a lot of them aren't, but I'm not sure. I think a lot have moved on to Facebook. It's just the way of things now. A lot of the hyperlocal blogs that were created through Talk About Local, or inspired by that movement, I think so much has moved on onto Facebook. It's just the way the world works now. So it's I think just I think in general kind of conversations have moved from dedicated websites to kind of more just social media profiles. So if you look at Digbeth is Good, the website isn't there anymore, but the Twitter and the Facebook, they're still going strong, and Pamela's still updated. So it's just different. Different things.
And how do you feel about that? We had an anthropologist on last week, so from an anthropological point of view, what's your feeling about the value of a website versus Facebook and Twitter?
I think the value is in the engagement. So as long as people are listening and they find a space to discuss things that are important, that's the important thing. I suppose the kind of historian in me is a bit sad that those archives have maybe gone forever. So they're not as accessible as they once were. I'm sure that's a bit sad. All these great long kind of wordy blog posts with lots of lovely pictures and stuff. I'd often see it as kind of producing some sort of kind of mini novella sometimes, blog posts. So I really sort of got into the creativity of it. So yeah, so I suppose a part of me sad that they're not out there anymore. But
Yeah,
that's
is it possible to get things like that back? Are they on the Wayback Machine, Sweyn, or well, do one of you know anything whether you can retrieve anything like that?
It'll still be somewhere, but it's just a question of finding it all again, I guess.
Mm.
I'm sure I saved the data from Digbeth is Good somewhere. So it's on
yes,
an old laptop hard drive somewhere.
yes, that's kind of typical, I would say. I mean, unless you make a real determined effort to archive local websites or anything that's on Facebook or anywhere else, unless you make a determined effort, it's eventually the formats are going to move on so that you will find it difficult either to find physically, or even if you know where it is, even if you know which disc it's on. After a certain number of years, it becomes more and more difficult to read that disc or the files on that disc or something. So it's not an easy problem, long-term archiving of data.
And this, I mean, there's a lot of local history societies out there. And with my work with the Jewish Heritage Association, so much of that research was done online, and an awful lot of the kind of the kind of archives and data from the Holocaust has been a concerted effort to get those online and to preserve those, whereas perhaps the more kind of seen as not as important stuff like the kind of local hyperlocal history of a place is, so it's not preserved and it's not out there, which it could be of interest to someone in the future maybe. But
please tell us a bit about the research on the biographies you're doing for people in the Holocaust. It sounds a really fascinating project.
It was something. There's a really good Volunteer Cardiff website and a Volunteer Wales website. So if you ever want to volunteer, that's where you go. You can kind of filter it through. Basically, I finished my degree with the Open University, and I had a year off. But I'd largely studied history of art, and I just really got into historical research. I love it, that kind of that kind of searching for nuggets of information, and I just really wanted to do something that exercised that. So I was searching for kind of heritage and culture kind of volunteer opportunities, and I found this with the Jewish Heritage Association. And there is a Holocaust memorial tablet in the Cairo Reform Synagogue. And what they're looking to do, and it's a work still in progress, they're still doing the project, is create a biography for all of those people named.
So Sweyn has on the screen now the link to the tablet and listing all those names. Wow, how many names are there? There's
a lot. It's a big project, and I was just one of very many volunteers kind of working towards this. So we'd be given names, and we were kind of given some guidance in kind of where to look online. So there's a lot of online information out there you can find if you're looking to for information on a relative that was a victim of the Holocaust. So there's the Yad Vashem, there's Jewish Gen website, there's countless others. So you'd literally just have a name, possibly an idea of the named relative who put their name on that tablet, and where they were from, and you just go. And there was an awful lot you could find out. I mean, it was amazing. It was also, obviously pretty harrowing, especially when you were looking into kind of the latter years of their life and how they came to be where they were. And there's one particular family I'm thinking of, and they made the journey from where they lived to the ghetto, and then from there to Auschwitz. And just the more and more you found out about this family, and the transportations and kind of the camp they were kept in, and kind of what happened to them there, it just became worse and worse, and it was just awful. So yeah,
I suppose I'm surprised to hear that there was so much documented some stuff documented for the times. It feels like, why would they have recorded that, and who recorded it?
I suppose a lot was recorded after the event, to make sure. So a lot of it was kind of survivors' testimonies, that sort of thing. They were named on the tablet by relatives who actually settled in Cardiff. So obviously during the Second World War, there was a wave of refugees coming to the UK, and a large proportion of those settled in Cardiff and South Wales. And that was the worst. Actually, was kind of. I did actually get to speak to some of their relatives. And a lot of the people who came over, they came over when things actually weren't that bad, and then they got worse and worse. So they made these desperate attempts to try and get their relatives out, and they couldn't. And they had to kind of be here and okay, but knowing what was happening to their loved ones back home, it sounds pretty awful.
It's good to see a project focusing on individual stories as well. I mean, it's quite easy to get caught up in the horrific numbers and statistics.
Well, that's the thing.
But to see actual individuals and the stories and what they've actually been through, and
it's to bring those stories to life, and it really does, and that's what really makes its home. I don't know if you see the Auschwitz Museum's Twitter account at all. But what they do is they post pretty much a story of a victim or a survivor every day, and there's usually a photograph with it, saying what happened to them, and it really does make those numbers mean something. It's a very sobering account, but it's fantastic what they're doing.
It reminds me of we had Jennifer Jones on the program a couple of months ago now, the journalist, and she was talking about covering individual stories, and getting, when people came into the facility where she was working with John Popham, getting people just to talk about themselves was important. Just ordinary people, some of them who just came in to stay warm while while it was cold outside. And wanted to do something, I think, and John and Jennifer got them to talk about themselves and their lives and stuff, and she thinks there's still some of that extant, which would be great to have in one place. We're talking about having some, to continue John's legacy, obviously, with this program, but also having some other kind of legacy for him, because he did so much to encourage people to get started and be involved online. And I know, Nicky, you met John in the past. Can you remember? When you first met him, or some occasions?
I don't think I remember when I first met him. He was just at every gathering, a social media gathering or event, or he was just always there, flying the flag. But I was saying to you before, just the encouragement he gave everyone who might have a gem of an idea or of inspiration. So I did a kind of bar camp style thing called Story Camp. And I just wouldn't have done it without him going, yes, you've got to do this. This is great, and just that constant encouragement, and you can do this. It was fantastic.
Can you explain a bit about what bar camp is, because not all of our listeners will understand or have been to one?
So they're more commonly known as unconferences, I think, where there's no set agenda and people suggest sessions or talking points, and I think by votes of cheers, they either get put on the agenda or they don't, and they're quite loose and free, and you can sort of be in one session and think not quite for me, and sort of drift off to another, and that's fine. But there'll be sort of some loose themes. So I mean, local Gov Camp, I think, or UK Gov Camp is the most successful of those.
Yeah, we've both been involved, Sweyn and I, in various of those, and we're going to be running not a camp, but an open data cafe, because Open Data Camp is not meeting this year on the 10th of April. So yeah, we're both working on that. But yeah, the bar camp model isn't so well known, I think, in the voluntary community sector. Again, another one Sweyn has helped us run this year was VCSS camp for infrastructure organizations. But I think the model, once people get their heads around, that they are the ones setting the agenda and the ones deciding on the topic, does sit very well with people who seem to want to be a bit more open. And obviously with lockdown, people have had to be online, and some people have just been making the best of it. What's it been like for you, lockdown?
Homeschooling. It's so, you were saying you did an online course, and my mum's been doing online courses and learning languages and yoga with Adrian, but yeah, with the two kids at home kind of bouncing off the walls, it's just been a more so a lot of bad baking, and just general homeschooling with the dreaded white rose maths, and the fronted adverbials I got to experience as well. They were fun. Yes. Yeah. I read about them in the media. I read Michael Rosen sort of being quite disparaging about them before we hit them, and I was like, oh, that's what they are. I didn't know. So yeah, lots of homeschooling. It's been quite tough.
I think it's been definitely it's been two different lockdowns at least, hasn't it? Those who have had to do homeschooling and those who haven't.
So those with loads of time and those with not enough time in the world.
Well, yes.
So it was a large part of why I stopped working for Building Communities Trust. I had a part-time comms and admin role with them, but I think when Boris said there won't be any more lockdowns after the first one, I just didn't believe him. So Carl had the full-time job, so I stopped. But yeah, my father died in March as well, so it's grieving alongside the rest of it. That was really hard, and a few of the grieving relatives whose family died in the first wave, they set up the campaign for a COVID inquiry now. But I mean, those sort of online communities of grieving relatives have been really helpful. So that group managed to secure some free counselling, telephone counselling through Cruise, which I took advantage of, and countless others did, which kind of saved my bacon really. And also there's a COVID Families Wales, so you're talking about the Marie Curie Day tomorrow. In Wales there's going to be a lot of buildings lit up in yellow, and we've sort of been campaigning for lots of, so I think tomorrow the lighthouse in Rose Park Lake and a few other Cardiff landmarks are going to be lit up in yellow in remembrance. So yeah.
You told us in your bio that are you still helping with Roa Tots, or is someone else doing that now? You're doing some stuff on Facebook with people?
But basically when I was at home with Rowan and then Robin, the pair of them, I had to do something just to stop myself going crazy, running after toddlers all day long. So I did a HTML course with Photo Gallery and Chapter in Cardiff, because I just thought, well, I've done all this online stuff, but I barely know how to code, and anytime I look at HTML, sweats break out. I just thought, well, I should crack this really. So I did. It was building a website purely out of HTML, and they said, oh, you've got to decide on what you want your website to be. And I was like, well, I don't do anything apart from go to mum and baby groups in Roath. That's all I do. Basically, Rowan was quite hyperactive, quite the explorer. So if we went to any outdoor uncontained spaces, he'd be off, and I'd just be running after him with Robin kind of strapped to me. So I became addicted to enclosed spaces that were built for safety, because yeah, he was just a danger to himself and others up until about the age of 5. So yeah, I just became addicted to church halls where he could just go careering around while I could sit there with a cup of tea and with Robin on my lap. And I was like, well, this is all I know. So I did the website on all of these, because there was so much in Roath. There's a lot of kind of churches there who do these groups for local mothers, and they used to have an amazing space called Cafe Junior, which was where you could just, get a nice coffee and a sandwich while your kid just ran around a soft play area. And so I did that, and I handcrafted it all out of HTML.
Oh, there we have it on screen.
Yeah, and as you can see, it's no
longer.
longer.
I share this. I share this. It's a beautiful picture of the lighthouse that you just mentioned. So
yes, and that's Rowan actually next to the lighthouse there.
Oh,
that's young toddler Rowan. And as you can see, it's no longer handcrafted out of HTML, because I found updating it was just an absolute, I'd just be there sort of typing in cut, and I just thought, I can't keep this up. So after all of that, I did get the certificate in coding. But after all of that, I transferred all of the content to a WordPress site. I did actually try to hand it over, because when we moved to Lanishan and the kids were in school, I just thought, well, I can't keep this up anymore, because half of the content would be from flyers I get handed going around all these church halls. But unfortunately, I couldn't find anyone to take up the mantle. So it's still out there, but I'm sure the content's out of date now.
I've been talking to somebody recently about it was a digital inclusion project in Sandwell in the West Midlands, where I'm do some of my work, and we were hoping to have a list of what individual members of this Sandwell Networkers group are doing around digital inclusion, offering tablets for loan, or digital support, or IT help desk, or whatever. And the people who work for the council are saying, it's difficult to keep a database, a directory up to date, because information gets out of date so quickly. And I've been saying to them, well, yes, that is true, but if each individual group is responsible for its data on its own website, then you can pull the data from there and feel fairly confident that it's still up to date. But it's hard to explain that to people who aren't used to putting together a project like that. I don't know how to put it in simpler terms, really, but you know what I mean.
That sounds like that's the ideal for Open Data Cafe.
Yes, possibly. Yeah. If I can explain it to them, because that's where I end up being a kind of a conduit between people who have a lot of technical knowledge and small community-led organizations who want to do something, and I don't want them to waste their time setting up something that's too complicated.
There was someone, and I can't remember his name. He set up is it Birmingham Live, or it was basically he'd pull data from all these different sources about events going on in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And
Birmingham Live, yeah.
And that would become, a listing site.
Yeah.
And he managed to actually get it so all of the ones with the tag Digbeth would be pumped into Digbeth is Good. So rather than me lovingly updating this Google Calendar by hand, it was just getting automatically updated from that.
It's great if you can do that. Yeah, I mean, I've been trying for years to learn how to scrape Eventbrite for events for community groups, digital events, and I've asked several people, and Eventbrite are very protective, I think, of their code. So it can be hard to do it other than manually.
But I don't know how he did it. He just sort of sent me some code to paste in, and I did, and it worked. But it was like a magic to me.
So you're still part of this kind of networks of people helping each other out there in the digital world.
Well, online. We're still in touch, but not really, if I'm honest. We did with Building Communities Trust. Me and Emma, we did do some social media surgeries with the 13 communities we were working with, sort of helping them, do whatever it was they wanted to do online. And in Lanishan, I'm organising a local residents association, but that was more in person, because Lanishon, you know, it had a really strong Facebook page that people would talk on, but it often descended into arguments. So it's like, well, maybe we need to actually sit down and talk to each other here, rather than shouting at each other about McDonald's and just dog poo or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a WhatsApp friendly person? Yeah. How many groups are you on?
Too many. The school WhatsApp group as well. Oh my gosh. So it's year 1, year 3, and the school PTA, and it's just constantly pinging away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On my neighbour WhatsApp group yesterday from Birmingham, there was horses in the park opposite where I live. So I told another neighbour, and she went around and took some photographs. So it can be quite nice to have those kind of exchanges. Yeah. I think they have their place, and I think certainly the mutual aid groups that have sprung up have found WhatsApp a great boon. I'd be interested to hear your take on that, actually, Nicky, because as well as feeling there's a place for mutual aid groups, when they first started springing up at the beginning of the first lockdown, my feeling was that probably there was already a charity or a volunteer organization out there doing similar work, but they weren't known about, and that's why mutual aid groups started, because people didn't realize there might already be a group doing similar things. What's your sense of that?
It was, I mean, I know that the Invest Local areas, because I was still working for BCT at the time, a lot of what they were trying to do was helping the groups that already existed try and change the way they were working so they could do it kind of in a safer way. I do know that with the voluntary organisations and community groups already out there, the thing is they were compromised as well, because so many of the volunteers were older or retired or vulnerable in some way. So some, you know, managed to kind of tweak the way they were working and keep on going, and others, you know, a large part of their capacity just couldn't help anymore. So yeah, it's but yeah, it's been a tough one.
You've been helping your residents group, I think you were saying on Facebook. How's that going for you?
It's been going okay, but basically, when I first moved to where I lived in Lanishon, there was talk of having a fish and chip shop just a few doors down, a late night fish and chip shop. So it's like, oh no, really? And we actually, as a community, we actually managed to fight that off, and they weren't granted the change in license for the property. But then McDonald's decided they were going to move in down the road, bizarrely yards away from a school and opposite a sheltered housing complex for older people. So they set themselves up, and then they decided they were going to become a 24-hour McDonald's. So it's like, oh gosh. So yeah, and I don't know, what I noticed was they just didn't, the local community kind of fighting this seemed to be starting from scratch in terms of getting hold of people and trying to build up that capacity to say enough people are objecting for it to be an issue. I said, well, is there no like residents group? And I was told, well, there was one, but it kind of died. So so we just set one up, and you know, we got a room given to us by the local library, and that kind of thing. And actually, there is a really strong community page for Lanishon and Thornhill, which, you know, it has a lot of followers and it works really well, but everything just becomes quite oppositional quite quickly. You know, so, you know, you can write the most inane post and suddenly like a great big bun fight will break out over nothing. which made me think maybe sitting in a room and actually talking to each other might be a better way of doing this. And it's actually worked out quite well, because all the local councillors used to come along at every single session, so it became more of a forum. And there's lots of development happening around here, so they're refilling the reservoir and making a whole kind of complex around that, and they're redeveloping the old tax offices, where actually my dad used to work his whole life. He was a tax officer, but yeah, they're knocking the buildings down and building housing there, and there's, you know, a lot of questions and kind of consultation going on, and they're redeveloping the local parks. So it was kind of a place where all these things could be discussed. It would sometimes descend into arguments over car parking and bin collections, and yeah, managing that was quite challenging. But
I think those are debates every community just has to have now and again in one form or another.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah, it's always going to be there.
Yeah. But since lockdown happened, obviously we couldn't have those face-to-face meetings anymore. Also, I did have on the group was just a space to push out minutes. At first, it was never meant to be like the Facebook group. That was just meant to be an add-on to the physical meetings. But then I think initially I said in the group, no advertising. But then all these local businesses, these kind of small local businesses were and I just didn't have, you know, with everything that's going on, you think, oh yeah, you know, go for it, just advertise your cakes or your scrap metal collections, whatever. So now it's become a place where there's lots of different posts from local businesses, which is fine, you know. But we are having a Zoom meeting soon to discuss the park redevelopment and the tax office redevelopments. So yeah, we'll have to see how the first online Zoom meeting with the residents group goes.
Excellent. I've had obviously multiple Zoom meetings since the beginning of March last year. I actually had heard of Zoom before everybody else kind of got in, like others. You hadn't? Yeah, well, I had, and I put on my mum's tablet, her iPad, so that when we started having Zoom meetings as a family, it was there, which was great. I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, so there's all kinds of idiosyncrasies to Zoom that people have had to kind of catch up with, and including lots of local authorities don't like using Zoom because of its security credentials. I think are they're not up to snuff for some local authorities. Sweyn, you can speak more authoritatively about that.
I don't think I want to speak any more about that. It's just a fact, unfortunately.
So some of them use them and some don't. Yeah, I think it kind of has its benefits. And now that Zoom lets you do breakout rooms and kind of wander freely in and out of breakout rooms, it has benefited a lot more people. And we're going to be using Zoom for Open Data Cafe in April, so we're looking forward to that. So have you had Zoom lessons, Nicky, or have you just picked it up yourself?
Building Communities Trust, we used it for kind of online meetings, but we hadn't heard of it before lockdown. And actually before then, because Building Communities Trust, the Invest Local project is run across the whole of Wales in 13 areas, like north, middle, south. So we, you know, there's staff across the whole of Wales, there's kind of board members across the whole of Wales. So we'd always have people trying to remotely get into kind of committee and board meetings and kind of staff meetings and stuff. And we always struggled along with Skype or kind of video, even conference calling on the telephone and all of that. And it never ever worked properly. There was always, you know, they'd be lagging on Skype. And then we discovered Zoom after lockdown, and it was like, why didn't we come across this before? This is great. The quality is brilliant. You know, we were just all kicking ourselves. And yeah, so we'd had kind of years of problems of we can't connect this person or we can't hear them, and suddenly Zoom came along and it answered all our prayers, really. I don't know why it wasn't as well known beforehand.
Well, it wasn't developed for communities, was it? It was developed for enterprise, so people who kind of businesses knew about it. The other thing is, of course, it's very demanding of data. So we reckon about an hour on Zoom uses about a gig of data. So for people who don't have as free access to data as everybody else, it is still quite demanding. And when I'm teaching community groups about using video services, I often still direct them towards Skype because it uses less bandwidth than Zoom. But Zoom has definitely got a place. But of course, all the others have had to up their game. Like Google Hangouts is now Google Meet, and it's certainly improved a lot since probably the early days. You would have remembered it, Nicky. It's improved.
It's been a godsend since lockdown.
Have you used any other? Because we've been, because as a result of the program, of course, we've been kind of looking at other machinery and stuff that's available. In the early programs, we looked at Comp and what was the other ones we looked at? Cradle, and it was another one that we looked at.
Cradle, yes.
So these are kind of more simpler devices that people who might not be very techy would just kind of, have one switch to make work. But one we both bought recently is a Facebook Portal, which is comes in various styles. But you can have one that is for a TV, or one that's kind of a set-top box, like a tablet size, where you just can say the person's name and it can ring whoever you're asking to ring. Is that anything you're familiar with?
My husband's installed Alexa over the house, and we can leave messages on that and call grandparents. And I mean, he's got the house wired and got all sorts going on. So yeah, he's got everything working, kind of hardware wise over the house. As well as the school have really kind of picked up with their app Seesaw they use, which you can just take pictures of the work you've done with the kids. But one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of lockdown, which has really saved my bacon, was a friend of mine, Antonio Gould. He used to live in Birmingham. I don't know if you know him.
I think so.
He's created something called livingroomdisco.com. This is a totally social, not needed thing, but it's been fantastic. So basically, what he does is you put in requests for music, and he will stream that on a streaming site. And then you set up a WhatsApp. He set up a WhatsApp group each week.
Yeah. Excellent. He's got Sweyn's got it on screen now.
More chat to each other. So it's like you're in a room sharing music and just chatting to each other about it. And each week will be a different theme. So I think the last week's theme was chocolate or candy, or St. David's Day, so it'll be like Welsh music. And it's just really good fun. We'll all kind of sit down. The kids will get in on the act. And I think next week we're going to have our first Zoom living room disco, which we can see people dancing. But it's been the highlight of our week, is just living room disco every Friday, where we all get to chat to each other and enjoy each other's music.
Fantastic. Well, one
it's
of the
amazing
events...
the social events you can have by Zoom or WhatsApp. With a bit of will, then they certainly can be brilliant, even if they're not quite as good as the real thing.
But he's actually doing something now where I think he's looking to sort of create mixes for other people. So for their events, be it birthday parties or bar mitzvahs or whatever. so
someone I've met on the circuit is Oisin Lunny, and he does Geek Pie Radio, and he does a lot of mixes for people, for friends and others. So he's active on Facebook with that now. But one of the things I was going to say I've enjoyed most of the events that have been held online since lockdown is Orkney Science Festival, which Sweyn was involved in. Ah, great.
The seaweed eating sheep. I was fascinated.
Good, yes.
Only see.
That's right, North Bromley sheep. Yes.
I'm fascinated with them as well. I can't wait to meet them.
Yeah, so Nicky, we understand that you're going to be having a closer connection with Orkney soon.
Yeah, Carl's got a job at Kirkwall Hospital, and we're going there
at the Balfour.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's a real coincidence. We didn't know before you came on the show, obviously, there was going to be another connection with yourself and Sweyn, but that sounds really good. But the science festival was amazing. It made me want to go to Orkney myself and see all the wonderful things that were being described and shown. Some really, really good stuff. I mean, talk about they made it look seamless, transferring from an in-person event to online. And Sweyn was part of that.
I keep having to say, we owed everything that we learned to the How the Light Gets In festival at Hay, because they did it first, and we just more or less, we didn't use all the same technology, but we just shamelessly copied their formats. And they worked. They did work. There's no question about it.
But it's been really good, because obviously we're making this big relocation, and we told the kids, and it's obviously quite daunting for them, and we're trying to give them a sense of where they're going and what will be there, and kind of so having all this online content, and and being able to show them virtually Orkney is just so good, and having of
course like every other event now, we have decided that this year it will be online again in more or less the same form, no matter what the situation is by September. But we're now faced with the prospect, no doubt, of having to try to integrate within those one-to-one type Zoom type calls, integrate a hall with a speaker and a screen and 100 people. And once you start to try and do that in Zoom, it's all a completely different ball game, and much trickier. So we'll see how we manage to come up with that migration back into some form of in-person stuff mixed in with the Zoom.
But no, it's been fantastic for showing the kids this is where you're going to be, and it's been very strange organising a relocation online. So I had a WhatsApp tour of the rental house we're moving into.
Oh, excellent.
It looks lovely, but that's kind of, we can't physically get up there and take a look around. This is how it's done now.
Yes, relocation during lockdown is or during restrictions is a whole other topic, but I mean, people have been doing it. Lots of people have been doing it all the time, as usual. Jobs change, people's lives change.
I saw one news story recently, which was quite, because my kids are addicted to Minecraft. And did you read about the church that has created a youth group in Minecraft, and they've built a replica of their church in Minecraft?
Brilliant.
And they get all the teenagers to attend the youth church in the virtual church, and they all talk to each other on the Minecraft chat. And I think they've got a few kind of people over, DBS check people overseeing the conversation to make sure it doesn't get too blue in there. But that's how their youth group meets now for on a Sunday is in the Minecraft church. And I told the kids, and they're like, we want to go to Minecraft church. And it's like, it's only for this church in Leicester that's done it. It's such a good idea.
Yeah. Is there anything else you've liked during lockdown online, Nicky? Because we're always trying to tell our listeners about other things that might be useful to them. Is there anything that particularly stood out for you?
Well, basically Tate Kids. So yeah, our walls are splattered thanks to the Jackson Pollock kind of creations. So like to try and get the house ready, we've just been rubbing paint splatters off the wall. But no, Tate Kids is great because they've got lots of different ideas of, just really simple stuff. Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, this is the story about the Minecraft. Yeah, it was Leicester.
St. John the Baptist in Leicester.
Leicester, brilliant.
Yeah. It took the creator about 4 hours to rebuild this Anglican church, which follows the real life one's blueprint. So
that's marvelous.
Now lots of meetings are happening.
So it's on the BBC.
Yeah, it's BBC website.
Yeah. Take Kids has been brilliant. Also, the South Bank Centre has had quite a few online events, and they did a disco, DYSCO, for kids, and we spent one Saturday, and it was just really well done. The DJ sort of talked you through it, saying this is your big entrance to the dance floor, and it was all. I don't know how she did the sound quality; it was amazing. But yeah, the kids were sort of pumped up like they would be at a wedding or something by 10 p.m. by the end of it. That was great.
That sounds marvelous.
tate.org.uk/kids. I'm not going to keep sharing all these screens that I'm finding. It gets a bit distracting.
Yeah, that's been really, and it's just really simple stuff. And it'll just be a bit of background on Andy Warhol or something. And then they'll create their own soup can or something.
Well, there's one I see, play with collage. That sounds like a great idea in somebody else's house.
It's just really simple stuff that you can do, especially because we're in Britain's wettest city here in Cardiff, so it's always raining. So on a wet day, it's
very, very beneficial. Yeah, we obviously marked St. David's Day on the program because we were on. It was on a Monday. Did you celebrate any particular way for St. David's Day yourselves this year?
Well, Living Room Disco had a St. David's Day session. It was all kind of Welsh songs and
excellent.
Yeah,
nice.
So that was the St. David's Day celebration.
Okay, we're nearly coming to the end of the show. Sweyn, have we got time to cover any of the other stories we picked up?
Yes.
Okay.
If you just let me know which one, I'll try and find it among my hundreds of tabs.
Okay, so the one we have that what causes digital exclusion, I thought was a useful one to look at. This is a European Union project, and it talks about competence with technology being crucial, but obviously that depends on a person's experience with similar technologies and interfaces and their subsequent knowledge of commonly used symbols and interaction techniques, and even apparently simple gestures such as swiping on a smartphone are not obvious to someone who has not used that device before. Other abilities and skills, such as the capacity to learn, the ability to cope with errors, and language skills are also important, and psychological factors play a key role. If someone lacks confidence in using technology, they're more likely to get flustered or confused and give up when they don't understand something. Conversely, if someone's willing to try out different things on an interface to see what happens, they're more likely to figure out how to use it. So I think that's a good description of in the kind of things that we notice and want people to hopefully overcome. Hopefully with programs like this to encourage them to try things out. I wrote a blog post recently that said, you're not unlikely to have to break the internet or break your computer unless you pour a hot sticky drink into it, which we're not advising.
It's important that it's sticky. It's very important
yes,
to wreck it.
That definitely wrecks it. Okay. And then
had Lewy body dementia actually, and kind of cognitive working out of new things. That was a big issue for him, and that's why often digital wasn't the answer for him.
We also discovered that as regards older people and their tablets, often their fingertips are drier, so using a touch screen was not as simple. So I have advised people to get laptops, older people to get laptops instead of tablets sometimes. Okay, another story, Sweyn, was the London Office for Technology and Innovation COVID Innovation Fund winners announced that they had 2 winners, including ones who were tackling digital exclusion by developing an interactive demographic map of user needs. And this one was put forward by Barnet, Brent, Kensington and Chelsea, Southwark and Westminster, seeking to build on the participating boroughs' work, creating richer data models for better understanding the distribution and different forms of digital exclusion. And it's known that across London, thousands of people are unfairly excluded from education and employment opportunities because they don't have the skills or access to devices to get online. And boroughs are concerned by digital exclusion growing as more and more services switch to online delivery. Priority groups with particular support needs include vulnerable people over 65, those who are unemployed, and Londoners with disabilities. So that was a useful one to cover. We do one more, Sweyn?
Yes, we're just about over time, but we'll do one more.
Okay, so this is the infographic. BIC Digital Inclusion are launching their Be Connected infographic. I thought this was useful. This is another Wales story. This is a tweet from DC Wales. Are you able to
yes.
open that one? Yeah. I thought it was useful to see what they were recommending about different things. They had some tips there, top tips for getting online. Top tip number 2 is learning a new skill or retrain for a new job, and many ways to learn, including online courses, which we talked about in the program. And tip three was to stay up to date with events and the news, catch up on TV and radio you may have missed. So simple things to encourage people to use some of the technology that's more available now. And that was launched at the beginning of March. And so I think we've run out of time, sadly.
I think we have.
Nicky, we usually like our guests to let people know where they can find them online if they wish to follow up with any of with yourself. So where's the best place to find you online if people want to find you?
I'd say I'm Getgood on Twitter. So I'm there. It's all public. So
that's easy enough to find. Yeah, excellent.
Well,
thanks a million for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to credits. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Oh, sorry. Have a great week. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.